You know that feeling when you're trying to really get your head around a big, important topic?
Oh yeah, trying to sift through all the noise.
Exactly. And just pull out the core insights you can actually, use.
That's precisely what we're doing here on The Deep Dive.
And today, we're tackling something that's clearly on a lot of your minds.
The leadership lessons people are taking away from the incredible success of Elon Musk.
We've been through some fascinating material sent in by listeners.
Yeah, including real-world insights and a perspective from an organizational psychologist who studies workplace dynamics.
And our goal today is to figure out which leadership principles are actually being attributed to Musk 5.
And maybe even more importantly, whether those are the right lessons to be taking away.
Exactly. We're hunting for those real aha moments, the ones that cut through the hype.
Honestly, diving into people's reactions to Musk's leadership style, some things really surprised me.
Like what?
Well, one source mentioned a Wharton class where students were heavily focused on analyzing his leadership model.
Wow. Okay. At Wharton, no less.
And a startup founder said Musk makes the idea of dictators look appealing again.
That's a wild take, but it says a lot.
Then you've got a CEO who feels empowered by Musk's approach.
So for him, it's validation.
Seems that way. And then a major investor just flat out said, it's better to be feared than loved.
The classic Machiavelli mindset.
Yep. And these aren't just academic thoughts. These are real business world takes.
And what's fascinating is the speed of it, the snap reactions to Musk's public persona and his undeniable results.
It's like this narrative is crystallizing in real time.
And the sources really ground this in actual behavior. This isn't just vibe-based.
No, there are real examples. Public criticism of employees, aggressive language, even layoffs tied to performance standards.
Then there's that very public takedown of a former Twitter exec, not exactly subtle.
And in his government advisory role, he's openly criticized federal staff pushing for big cuts.
So the perception forms. A leader who drives massive results through intense methods.
Intense is a polite word for it.
And that's where the organizational psychologist's input really matters.
So what's their take?
They respect the vision, Tesla, SpaceX, all that impact.
That part's undeniable.
But they say his people management style would fail him in a standard leadership course.
Wow, that's a pretty strong judgment.
Yeah. Leading through intimidation, they argue, simply doesn't work long term.
And more than that, it actively hurts productivity.
Which flies in the face of that better to be feared investor comment.
Completely. And there's evidence too, not just theory.
Like that NBA study, players under abusive coaches performed worse over time, even after leaving.
And they were more likely to get technical fouls, which shows deeper behavioral fallout.
Right? It wasn't just short-term damage, it lingered.
Then there was the neonatal intensive care simulation study.
Oh yeah. One dismissive comment before the simulation, and it caused a measurable drop in performance.
That's wild. Just one insult impacted life or death decision-making?
Yep. Diagnostic accuracy plummeted. That's the power of psychological safety.
And it's not an outlier. There's a meta-analysis cited, 400 plus studies, 36 countries.
Nearly 150,000 people. The conclusion? Aggressive leadership leads to lower productivity, less collaboration, more disengagement.
And your best people, they leave.
First chance they get. So here's the natural question. How do we explain the success of Tesla and SpaceX?
That's the big one. If the style is so toxic, how do the results happen?
The argument, his success came despite the harsh leadership, not because of it.
That's the aha moment. We've been confusing cause and effect.
Exactly. And that ties into something called idiosyncrasy credit.
That's like social capital, right?
Yeah, you succeed, build up credit, and then people tolerate more unconventional, even toxic behaviors.
So the harshness isn't what made him successful. It's tolerated because he was successful.
Bingo. Think about the engineers at SpaceX. They might endure it because they believe in the mission.
But the risk is that we see the style and think that's what works, when really it's not.
It's a dangerous misread, and it leads to imitation of the worst traits.
The article talks about demon mode versus just having high expectations.
Big difference between being demanding and being demeaning.
And actually, when people feel respected, they're more open to tough feedback.
Because they trust the motive behind it, like a great teacher pushing you because they believe in you.
That framing changes everything. I know you can do better versus just tearing someone down.
And Musk himself tweeted about making it unsafe to not speak up at SpaceX.
But that coexists with a reputation for being intimidating. Is it really a safe environment?
Or does fear just stop people from disagreeing even if the surface looks open?
That's the tension. Then there's his push for government cuts. Same intense approach.
But the source questions whether that works in government. It's not a startup.
Exactly. Firing scientists, slashing pandemic programs, even cutting revenue staff, that's questionable.
And they contrast it with Lincoln, a cabinet of rivals, open dissent.
The opposite of top-down command.
They even bring up Steve Jobs.
Another genius with a tough rep. But the story that matters is his change.
Right? After he was fired, he evolved, more compassionate, more collaborative.
And that version of Jobs led Apple into its most successful era.
That's the hopeful part. Even hard-charging leaders can grow.
It reinforces the idea that vision and brilliance alone aren't enough. You need trust, respect, real team cohesion.
Which ties into servant leadership, leading by enabling others to succeed.
And the research shows it works. Those companies outperform over time.
It's not about being soft, it's about being supportive and demanding.
Tough love, not tough ego.
Which brings us back to Musk. The hope is that students, future leaders, learn from his brilliance, not his abrasiveness.
Emulate the strengths, rise above the weaknesses.
And that's what this show is really about, understanding the full picture, not just admiring success, but learning from it, ethically, sustainably.
So let's leave listeners with a final thought, a question.
If real innovation depends on keeping great people and building trust,
but what are the long-term costs, seen and unseen, of leading through fear?
That's the one to reflect on.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.